You never forget the sound of a chainsaw when it isn't supposed to be there. It was early Saturday morning, sun barely over the tree line, when that sharp buzz roared through our backyard. I bolted up from my coffee, heart pounding, because it was coming from the fence line, the gate my family and I had just built last month. By the time I got outside, the scene looked like something from a bad movie. There they were, 3 HOA board members standing smugly in our yard, one of them gripping a running chainsaw, carving right through the wooden gate we had paid for. The other 2 held clipboards like this was some official operation. Splinters flew, the chain screeched, and before I could even shout, the top hinge ripped loose. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I yelled. The woman with the clipboard barely glanced at me. "Your fence violates HOA regulations. We've sent multiple notices. This gate is unauthorized, so we're removing it." "Removing it?" I barked. "You're trespassing. That's my property. You can't just storm in with a chainsaw." She gave me the kind of smirk only an HOA Karen can pull off. "We have authority here. If you don't comply, we'll escalate further." I clenched my fists, ready to call the sheriff, when I heard a sound I hadn't expected. The creak of the back porch door. My grandpa stepped out. Now, you need to understand something about him. This man isn't just some old-timer. He's a decorated Vietnam veteran, a man who's seen firefights most people can't imagine. And when he saw strangers destroying his fence, something in his eyes shifted. He didn't say a word at first. He just walked slowly back inside the cabin. The board members chuckled, muttering something about calling their bluff. But then, the screen door slammed again, and there was Grandpa, carrying a weapon I never thought I'd see outside. A military base, an honest-to-God M60 machine gun, the same kind he carried half a century ago overseas. The sheer weight of it made the board members freeze, their smug grins evaporating in an instant. The chainsaw sputtered and died. Karen dropped her clipboard. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely breathe, but I'll never forget the words Grandpa finally spoke, his voice calm, steady, and colder than ice. "You touch one more board on this land and you'll regret it." The air went dead silent. Even the birds seemed to stop chirping when Grandpa leveled that cold stare across the yard. The HOA board members, who a minute ago looked so smug and entitled, suddenly looked like kids caught sneaking out past curfew. The man with the chainsaw let it slip from his hands. It clattered against the dirt, the sound echoing like a gavel, striking. His bravado drained away in an instant. "Hey now," he stammered, raising his hands. "There's no need for that kind of display." Grandpa didn't move, he didn't blink. The M60 wasn't pointed at anyone directly, but its very presence was louder than any threat could be. "You came onto private property," Grandpa said evenly. "Destroyed what isn't yours. And you think your little rulebook means more than the Constitution of this country. I fought for that flag, and I'll be damned if I let a pack of clipboard cowards walk all over it." Karen, the ringleader, tried to recover her composure. She picked up her clipboard again, though her hand was trembling. "You can't intimidate us. We're the Homeowners Association. We have authority. If you don't comply, we'll call the police." Grandpa actually chuckled at that. A low, steady laugh that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Call them," he said. "In fact," he turned his head toward me without lowering the weapon. "Go ahead. Boy, dial the sheriff. Let's see who's really in the wrong here." I didn't hesitate. Within seconds, I had the county sheriff's office on the line, explaining that armed trespassers had entered our property and destroyed part of our fence. When I mentioned the chainsaw, the dispatcher's tone changed immediately. By the time the HOA board realized I wasn't bluffing, it was too late. You could already hear the sirens in the distance, growing louder by the second. Karen's face went pale. You don't understand," she sputtered. "We were enforcing compliance. This family is in violation of Code 14B. Grandpa," cut her off with a glare sharp enough to slice steel. "The only violation here is trespassing and vandalism, and you're about to answer for it." The patrol cars rolled up fast, dust kicking into the air. 2 deputies stepped out, hands resting on their holsters, scanning the scene. One of them immediately spotted the broken fence and the chainsaw lying in the dirt. The other's eyes widened when they noticed Grandpa standing there with the M60. "Sir," one of the deputies said carefully, "let's just put that weapon down nice and slow, all right?" Grandpa didn't move, but his voice carried steady authority. "Deputy, this weapon isn't loaded, but those trespassers," he gestured toward the board members, "came onto my property and destroyed my fence without cause." The deputies looked at each other, then back at the HOA crew. The board members tried to talk over each other, shouting about HOA authority and rules being broken. But the deputies weren't buying it. One of them bent down, picked up the chainsaw, and held it up like Exhibit A. "This looks like criminal damage to me," he said flatly. Karen's jaw dropped. But we're the HOA." "And this," the deputy shot back, "is the United States of America. HOA rules don't override state law." Grandpa finally lowered the M60, resting it against the porch railing. He hadn't needed to fire a single round. His presence alone had flipped the entire balance of power. And as the deputies began questioning the board members, I realized something. This wasn't just about a fence anymore. This was about exposing the HOA's abuse of power, once and for all. Karen's voice climbed an octave as she waved her clipboard like it was a badge of authority. "Deputy, you don't understand. We had to enforce this. The homeowners association has bylaws, and they signed an agreement when they moved in. That fence violates the Uniform Appearance Code. We're within our rights." The deputy shook his head. "Ma'am, what I understand is that you and your board entered private property without consent and used a chainsaw to destroy a fence. That's felony-level vandalism. Bylaws don't give you a free pass to break the law." Karen opened her mouth to protest again, but Grandpa finally stepped forward. He leaned the M60 against the porch and crossed his arms, his voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. "I've fought tyrants on foreign soil who believed their word was law," he said. "Every one of them thought they were justified. And you know what? They all learned the hard way that power without accountability is nothing but bullying." Karen tried to fire back, but the other two board members, her so-called allies, were already backing away. One muttered, "We didn't sign up for this," before shoving his hands in his pockets and staring at the ground. The chainsaw guy avoided everyone's gaze, his earlier bravado completely gone. The sheriff's car pulled up just then, and out stepped Sheriff Daniels himself, a broad-shouldered man with decades of service. He didn't waste time. He surveyed the scene, the busted gate, the chainsaw, and the pale faces of the HOA crew. "What's going on here?" Daniels asked. One of the deputies spoke up. "HOA board trespassed and destroyed the homeowner's fence. Homeowner's grandfather detained the situation until we arrived. No shots fired, but—" he gestured to the M60. "This was brought out." Daniel's brow furrowed. He turned to Grandpa. "That true?" Grandpa nodded once. "I didn't raise it on anyone. Just made sure they knew they weren't welcome to tear down what isn't theirs." Daniels turned his gaze to Karen. "You and your board are in serious trouble. Trespassing, property damage, attempted intimidation. You think an HOA gives you the right to come onto land and destroy private property?" Karen sputtered, red-faced. We were enforcing the rules." Daniels's expression hardened. "Lady, the only rules that matter here are the ones written into state law, and right now you're in violation of several." The two deputies moved in, placing the board members in cuffs one by one. The chainsaw guy protested weakly, but Karen screamed the loudest, swearing that she would sue, that she would make sure the entire sheriff's department regretted this. Daniels didn't flinch. He simply leaned down, looked her in the eyes, and said, "You don't scare anyone here, not this family and not me. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes." As the board members were loaded into the patrol cars, Grandpa finally exhaled. He patted the M60, almost with a hint of nostalgia, then looked at me. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the only way to stop a bully is to remind them there are lines they don't get to cross." The convoy of patrol cars rolled away, leaving our broken fence as the only evidence of the HOA's arrogance. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. The HOA wasn't just going to answer for a gate. With the sheriff involved, their entire abuse of authority was about to be dragged into the light, and thanks to Grandpa, they had no idea what storm was coming next. The following week, our quiet little county wasn't quiet anymore. Word spread fast that the HOA board had been arrested in broad daylight, and the community was buzzing. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to came by, dropping off pies, tools, and offers to help rebuild the gate. It was like everyone had been waiting for someone to finally stand up to the HOA, and Grandpa had lit the spark. But the real blow came a few days later, when Sheriff Daniels held a press conference. Standing on the courthouse steps, he laid it all out: criminal charges for trespassing, destruction of property, and unlawful intimidation. He didn't mince words either. No homeowners association has the right to operate like a gang. Property owners have rights, and those rights will be protected. Reporters scribbled notes furiously, and the story made the local evening news. Seeing Karen being marched into court in cuffs was almost surreal. The smug woman who once barked orders and fines at her neighbors was suddenly a defendant, staring down real consequences. Back at home, Grandpa took a different approach. He didn't rebuild the gate right away. Instead, he dragged the broken pieces of wood into the yard, lined them up, and drove 2 posts into the ground. Then, with careful hands, he mounted the splintered planks across them like a memorial. "This," he said, hammer echoing across the property, "isn't just a gate anymore, it's a reminder. Nobody tears down what's ours without answering for it." Neighbors came to see it, and soon the makeshift display became a local symbol. Folks who had lived in fear of HOA retaliation suddenly found courage. One man filed a lawsuit against the board for years of harassment. Another spoke publicly about fraudulent fines he'd paid. It was as if the chainsaw had cut more than wood. It had severed the HOA's chokehold over the neighborhood. For me, the most unforgettable moment came 2 weeks later in court. I sat beside Grandpa as the judge read the charges. Karen, still, fiery despite the evidence stacked against her, tried to interrupt the proceedings, shouting about rights and rules. The judge cut her off with a gavel strike so loud it silenced the entire room. "Let me be perfectly clear," the judge said. "A homeowners association is not above the law. You will answer for your actions the same as anyone else." See. Gavel fell again, and just like that, the illusion of HOA authority shattered. Walking out of that courthouse, Grandpa carried himself with the calm dignity of a man who had seen enough battles to know when one was won. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He just looked at me and said, "Remember this. Bullies only win when good people stay quiet." Today, we weren't quiet. As we drove home, I glanced in the rearview mirror at the courthouse steps. For the first time in years, I felt like our land was truly ours again. The HOA might have thought a chainsaw could tear through our gate, but all they really did was open the door to their own downfall. And thanks to Grandpa's stand, that door slammed shut behind them forever. And that's how an HOA Karen learned. The hard way that you don't bring a chainsaw to a fight with Grandpa's M60. If you thought this showdown was wild, just wait until you hear what happened when the HOA tried to fine us $1 million and ended up losing everything. Click right here to watch the next story. And trust me, you don't want to miss how that one ends. Subscribe to HOA Karen Stories, where every HOA bully gets the justice they deserve.